Abandonment or care, a biopolitical analysis of trap-neuter-return programs for cats living on the streets of South Florida. Direct engagement with cats living on the streets of Miami drives my current research. The politics, animal shelter statistics, advocates, and even the science published in the name of their welfare stifle the potential for direct engagement with their lived experiences. This paper engages with emerging theoretical analysis of more than human Foucauldian biopower that explores the intersection of law, politics, and biopolitical classification systems imposed upon non-humans. As I will demonstrate, ferality is not a static state of being. It is an arbitrary classification system that lingers in the liminal spaces between wild and domestic. Ferality is happening to individual cats and kittens. Through their stories, this paper problematizes ferality, demanding feral be understood not as an accepted non-human description, but as a politically motivated classification used to justify violence against non-humans living outside of their predetermined roles as companion animals. The wild domestic binary and the political systems that use the arbitrary binary to control human and non-human populations is well established as long ago as 1998 by Newman's Imposing Wilderness. Furthermore, Anderson argues that domestication is a process, not a static product. Becoming with non-human companions requires more detailed analysis of complex histories, according to Haraway. And if dedomestication and rewilding promise novel ecosystems and life beyond current classification systems, as is argued by Lorimer and Driessen and Van Dooren, then the concept of ferality requires more detailed analysis. How does a non-human become feral? Who makes this determination? Is ferality for life? Is ferality a behavior, a context, or a political narrative? Does ferality happen to a species, a population, or an individual? In the case of Daniel, pictured here, he was born to a life on the streets and was noticed by a colony feeder because his siblings had all died. She posted this video on social media asking for help, as he appeared to be unable to eat even the wet food she was trying to provide. He was born to a cat living on the streets. At the moment of rescue, he was unsocialized, but he was too ill to react overly aggressively. Through rescue, he became socialized through the required handling of his medical care. But at the end of the day, he was born free roaming. He was born, quote, feral. Should he then become part of the TNR program, be sterilized and abandoned back to the streets? The Florida Wildlife Commission defines a feral as, quote, an animal that has escaped from domestication or has been abandoned to the wild and has become wild, and the offspring of such animals. Traditional animal control programs implemented culling of cats classified as feral. Under pressure from no-kill advocates, Miami-Dade County shifted toward management of feral cats through trap-neuter-release, or TNR, programs, a program listed as a, quote, life-saving initiative. Is death or sterilized life a manifestation of space-specific ethico-legal frameworks, as Srinivasan in 2013 suggests? Or do individual cats caught in the implementation of such programs offer up another narrative? The director of Miami-Dade Animal Services, Alex Munoz, initially launched a, quote, trap-neuter-give-back, or TNG program, with a written standard operating procedure effective September 11th of 2012. This SOP failed to provide a clear way of identifying a feral cat. However, here, ferality was not even listed ambiguously as a criteria through which to select a pathway for the incoming cat. Prior to the changes in 2011, any cat even ambiguously identified as feral was immediately sent to death. Now, an incoming cat would have only two possible pathways, adoption or TNG. Ferality is not mentioned when a cat is identified for either processing through TNG or adoption. Ferality is only mentioned when vet techs process the cat for surgery as a matter of employee safety. Debates in cultural and political geography and cognate fields have troubled the binary distinction between domestic and wild life. However, the self-preservation of politicians and the institutions that hinge on maintaining this distinction, for example, through programs to control feral life, remain underexplored. As Srinivasan in 2013 points out, assumptions about companion animal policies are highly contingent upon space and politics. At the same time, she argues that bringing animals' stories back into political geography must be more than a discussion of how non-humans function as mere things tied to humans and policies. I argue here to the Board of County Commissioners of Miami-Dade County that the individual stories, the lives, the bodies, the injuries, the illnesses, and the deaths of cats processed under the TNR program provide a direct alternative narrative to the one that's being presented by the politicians currently in charge of implementing the TNR program in the county. This paper will build on these debates by interrogating what happens when a political program to cull all stray cats, implemented through policies that justify the killing of all untethered domestic animals in the name of securing human and wildlife safety, is confronted with the public demands to shift toward making those same non-human lives live. After a 2012 straw ballot vote established that an unprecedented 64.49% of Miami-Dade County voters agreed to voluntarily increase their property tax to reduce the killing of shelter animals, making dogs and cats live, not die, became a calculated campaign platform for local officials. The rollout of the TNG and then TNR programs and the application of these programs to all incoming cats to the shelter was a direct result of these political needs to satisfy the desires to become a no-kill community. For Miami-Dade County Animal Services, the public pressure to make live through no-kill policies resulted in the county's adoption of the trap-neuter-return program later in 2012. The county's commitment to making pets live through government-funded programs resulted in a $4 million increase in the 2013 Animal Services budget, an annual budget that has now more than doubled to $26 million as continued effort to support the TNR program and other, quote, life-saving programs. The feral and free-roaming cat population was identified as the statistically and strategically most important population to further the goal of reaching no-kill. Before the 2012 shift from culling to TNR, all free-roaming cats at the shelter were euthanized upon intake, whereas earlier sheltering tracking techniques aimed to represent the animal population through demographics of treatability and placeability. The TNR program expels cats from the need to be placeable in adoptive homes, deploying sterilization and abandonment back to the streets as a biopolitics of the population to make the cats' lives useful within the political goals of the department. These goals become operationalized through a set of biopolitical interventions that focus on population-level generalities, such as those described by Collier in 2009.
This is Here and Now from NPR and WBUR Boston. Miami-Dade County has adopted a controversial program to deal with feral cats roaming the streets. It's called trap-neuter-release. Joining us to explain is Alex Munoz, Director of Miami-Dade Animal Services. And Alex, this is not a new problem.
Yeah, for years, the shelter and many shelters, cats have been brought in, very hard to adopt. We're talking here about free-roaming cats. They have other names such as feral cats or community cats. And the issue is that type of animal is not a candidate for adoption. It's not an animal that you can take into your home. It's free-roaming. So in the past, they weren't getting an opportunity for a chance to live. What's changed is the implementation of a policy that we call trap-neuter-return. That means citizens, residents are bringing in these cats to us, and we're providing with the option of providing a surgery, a rabies shot, and returning them to those citizens. It's a voluntary program.
And it sounds like something that people could get behind, that this may be better for the cats, although there are questions about that because cats being out in the wild like that can come in contact with disease, they can break bones, they can be harmed by other animals, or they could themselves go out there and kill birds, for example.
Yes, there's always going to be people that aren't fans of it, and the focus might be on them. Quite honestly, by our participation numbers, we see something else. We see overwhelming support for it.
According to this 2014 interview, Munoz argues that free roaming is just another name for feral or community cats, and that the program is not trap-neuter-release, but rather is trap-neuter-return to the streets. This narrative shifts the responsibility of the cat onto the constituent who presents the cat to the shelter and onto the cat itself, who was found to be, and as ambiguously defined, free roaming. Through TNR, individual lives are counted as a positive statistical outcome as the cat is rushed through sterilization. The slow death the cat may endure once abandoned back to the streets is a reality that remains unrepresented within this biopolitical system.
That on paper and in charts and in abstracted numbers, animal services will continue to demonstrate the improvements in life-saving programs that they are achieving thanks to your generous support over the years. And I do thank you all for that. However, I would like to point out that it's not just about numbers. It's not just about scale. It is about individual pet lives. It's about individual human beings who care for those pets. And so I would like you just please to consider a couple of examples. These are not the only examples, and I'm happy to provide more evidence, medical records, public records request, etc., if you are interested individually or as a group. On November 16, 2017, a rescue plea was sent out for a 3.1-pound kitten, approximately this size. She had been TNR'd several weeks before that, ear-tipped and spayed, placed back out on the street, then subsequently attacked by a dog and returned to Animal Services at 3.1 pounds. On January 17, 2018, I was there to drop off a TNR cat, and there was a 2-pound kitten, approximately this size, waving at me. He was there to be neutered and put back out on the street. On June 12th, there was a rescue plea for a 1.1-pound kitten who had already been spayed and ear-tipped, but her temperature had crashed, and they realized, wait, we can't put her back out on the street.
A political narrative of the individual non-human bodies remains to be explored, whereas the political and theoretical work in more than human and conservation geographies has focused on the species and population level entanglements between human and non-human. This paper focuses on the individual non-human story's potential to disrupt the political narrative. Ferality is ambiguously and strategically written into politics through the adoption of biopolitical techniques like TNR. As a population-level statistical technique, TNR is politically successful. However, individual cats defy the population-level statistics used to describe and justify the performance metrics. Their flesh and their lives and their deaths refuse to be rendered technical. Through this research, a few cats tell their stories through scars, blood, injury, shaved fur, and amputated ears. One of the stories I will focus on is that of Sprinkles.
So I received an email yesterday, as we do every single day, for requests for rescue help from Miami-Dade Animal Services. And Sprinkles, who is now asleep on my chest, her medical record came across my computer, and I opened it, and it says that on June 7th, she weighed 6 pounds. It was processed for TNR. Now let's really stop and think about that for a second. This 1-pound kitten was processed as a 6-pound TNR cat. She's ear-tipped. You can see the little tip on her ear right there. And I wish you could feel her because she is all bones. They spayed her the same day she came in. And it says very clearly on her record, TNR spay. So the intention was to dump this 1-pound kitten back out onto the street after claiming in her medical record that she weighed 6 pounds.
Individual cat experiences have no place in a system that focuses only on population and government agency achievement. Miami-Dade Animal Services' version of TNR is no more than the imposition of a feral identity upon any cat presented by any constituent who claims to not be the legal guardian or owner. This paper argues that the case of TNR in Miami demonstrates the definition of ferality, and thus the ubiquitous classification of abandoned domestic non-human life that is systematically killed or preserved is inscribed within wider institutional and political dynamics. While the dominant narrative is one of increased life-saving programs, this paper demonstrates that through exploring individual cat stories, the nuance of individual life becomes secondary to achieving the statistical goal of no kill. The TNR programs render complex lives technical, foregoing individualized consideration for care and responsibility for the cats. The permeability of ferality, both as a concept lurking between wild and domestic, and as an operationalized death-making classification, is central to staying with the complexities of human-non-human coexistence. As I continue this research, additional questions arise regarding the ethical and legal considerations for domestic animals living outside of domestic space and in government-run shelters. What stories do individual cat injuries and suffering tell us about the blurring of feral and free-roaming cat identities? What is this life cats live after being processed as a live release statistic? How can a more complex discussion of ferality help break down the assumptions about established policies that prioritize non-human life that conforms to either wild or domestic? While the risks to human participants are considered, what are the potential risks for individual cats that are currently in the custody of governmental agencies being researched? Additionally, I'm currently developing a paper on the unique discrepancy and vulnerability in legal methods of killing cats when classed as either pets in a shelter or cats living as wild or pests in urban Miami. Under TNR programs, cats are sterilized and returned to the streets. If a constituent wants cats removed, the only option is to hire a professional trapper. Trappers treat cats as wildlife, and they are killed by gassing, rather than their, quote, feral counterparts presented to shelters for re-release or euthanasia by injection. More Than Human research addresses the need to move beyond the assumptions of the wild-domestic binary. But in addition to this, we must also consider the legal ramifications of being classified as pest or nuisance. In this future work, I will develop a framework to assess the vulnerability of cats under the incongruous statutes stipulating legal methods of death-making.